But no. To be, I don't know. I'm just saying.
Where is Dr. Smerconish?
We're
How
all
many
early.
ways can you pronounce his name, right?
Pretty good.
Early is on time.
If you're not early, you're late.
Correct. Hi, Michael.
There he is.
Oh.
Dr. Smerconish.
There he is. Finally.
Oh.
Hey,
Hi,
y'all.
gang.
Hey,
Hi.
Michael.
you?
Hey.
Hey, Michael.
What's happening?
Cheers.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah, what you drinking, Michael?
There he is.
Yeah, Michael.
I'm not into the sauce yet. I will be.
No F-bombs.
Already- Hey, PJ, before I get rolling, you tell me if our connection is.
Michael, when you're ready, you can unmute.
Okay, I am unmuted, but I want to make sure that everybody can hear and see me.
Yes.
Okay,
We can all see you.
if you see me, what is it that I'm holding in my hand?
That is an F-bomb.
That is an F-bomb. That is an F-bomb. Okay, good. Okay. PJ, are we ready to rock and roll? I know I'm a minute or two early, but I've got a lot to say.
We are ready and rocking after you.
Okay, one more thing. I want to get my volume set. And if I wanted to see everybody at once, how would I do that?
So right now you're pinned, but if you were to swipe over, you should actually be able to change your view. It's your view, so you should be able to change it directly on the iPad or whatever works for you.
You know what I think I'll do is I'll say my piece and then I'll make sure that I can do that.
All right.
First of all, thank you, everybody. You are newsletter subscribers. You know it's my passion project. I love the fact that you subscribe and that you open it and that you read it. Thank you for that. Thank you, Alice Herrick, who is our managing editor. Thank you, Austin, Austin McCain, who's our weekend editor. Thank you, David Yang, behind the scenes. Thank you, TC, for everything. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, PJ. You could probably see PJ on the screen right now. I talk about him often. He does all the video work. Earlier today, I was going back and forth with our designer relative to the cartoon book. I can't wait. I know you can't wait. We're about a month away from being able to take orders for that. And also, may I thank my friends at Parks Casino, because every time I do the videos, it's with their support. And without them providing all the bells and whistles, we wouldn't be able to do it. So Parks Casino, the Bet Parks online casino and sportsbook app, you know what they say, you love to play, you play to win, you bet Parks. You got to be 21. And in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, or Maryland, parkscasino.com. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Thank you, Parks. I appreciate you. Okay, here's where we are. Let me cut to the chase. It's the finale of the GOP convention, and yet all the news is on the Democratic side of the aisle. The situation with President Biden has reached an absolute tipping point. I am the least surprised. There's just no way that the momentum of Schiff and Schumer and Jeffries and Pelosi, Obama by extension, because as I said, there's no way that Clooney would have penned the New York Times piece, sought his approval, and then published it unless President Obama was in sync. Throw in the New York Times editorial page, the Washington Post, David Ignatius, Ezra Klein, David Axelrod. I have been saying for 3 weeks that it is a question of when, not a question of if. Brings me no joy to say any of that. I'm not gleeful about the fact that there's just no way, in my opinion, that President Obama will be the standard bearer, President Biden, pardon me, Obama on the brain, will be the standard bearer of the Democratic Party. I've said repeatedly that it didn't need to end like this. It was all predictable, and the reason that it resonates with so many of us is that we've been there in our own lives. This is not a complex matter of climate change where you need to understand the science. You don't need to understand the geography of Ukraine to have an opinion. It's like it comes for us all. It comes for us all. And consequently, we get it. And there's no way to reverse it. Initially, I think that the Biden White House was treating this as if it were a political issue. It's not a political issue. It is a life issue. And so I'm beyond the issue. of what's about to happen with President Biden. And perhaps I'll eat crow next week on this, or the week after, or in a month, but I don't think so. And I'm on to the next level. And the next level is he going to endorse the vice president? Is he going to endorse Kamala Harris? Or is he going to embrace some form of competition? My opinion is unchanged in this regard. I think that competition is in the best interest of the Democratic Party, not here to carry their water, just trying to play the role of an analyst. I think it's in the best interest of the vice president, and I think it's in the best interest of the nation. If this is handed to the vice president, as I said in a poll question not too long ago, if it's a matter of acclamation and not competition, I don't think it benefits her. I think there's a perception among many that it was given to her when she became the running mate, because let's be honest, she had a poor showing as a candidate. The only thing that distinguished her back in that cycle, in the 2020 primary cycle, and I remember being in the debate room when, she attempted a takedown of then Vice President Biden. That was the high watermark of her presidential campaign. She dropped out before any votes were cast. And I think there's been this perception, because he had said that he wanted it to be a female, therefore it was given to her. No doubt an advantage to her being selected is that she was not only female, but female of color. And I think it would be to her advantage if there were some type of a competitive process, and if she were to emerge from it victorious. All of which, by the way, presupposes that she wants it. Like, we're all kind of treating this as if, well, of course she wants it. Who wants to get in the ring with Donald Trump for the next 4 months? Maybe she doesn't want it. And I'm guilty of the next step, which is to say, wouldn't it be great if there were a competition? And I envision Andy Beshear and Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer and Josh Shapiro. Who's to say any one of them wants to have to duke it out? So there are a lot of questions, but the questions tonight are not questions as to what will President Biden do, but rather, how is this going to play out when he makes it known? I mean, I thought it was heartbreaking when I saw him both get on the when I saw him board Air Force One, climbing the staircase, small as it was, and then even worse when he arrived home from Vegas, not having spoken, looked like it was very late at night. He was clearly worn out, totally worn out. And I have to say this, like, why those around him didn't rein this all in sooner, I don't understand. I assume, we're going to get the story. There will come a time when Mark Halpern's going to tell us everything that went on behind the scenes, a la Game Change or Double Down. And my expectation is that we're going to find out that people close to him wanted him to hang in, and nobody would tell the emperor that he had no clothes. I'm not alone in saying that there ought to be some type of a competitive process. James Carville weighed in on this a couple of weeks ago. I want to see the Democratic Party hold 4 historic town halls between now and the Democratic National Convention in August, one each in the South, Northeast, Midwest, and West, he said. George Clooney in that piece. And by the way, can I ask again aloud, but for the debate, were those like George Clooney, who had been up close and personal with the president, were they going to tell us? Imagine that the debate had taken place in September, which is when the Commission on Presidential Debates had scheduled it for. Imagine we all didn't see what we saw in the debate. 2 weeks prior was that fundraiser in Los Angeles. I gave the benefit of the doubt to the president. You'll remember that I had from the Hollywood Reporter, the guy who shot the video that was being shown on a loop at Fox. And I had him explain, through his camera eye, what it all meant. Then comes Clooney and others who were there. And either the Times or the Post wrote a story and said everybody who was there was of the same mindset. The people who were in the photo op line were taken aback by what they saw. Well, George Clooney himself, in that essay in the New York Times, quote, "Let's hear from Wes Moore and Kamala Harris and Gretchen Whitmer and Gavin Newsom and Andy Bashir and JB Pritzker and others, let's agree that the candidates not attack one another, but in the short time, we have focus on what will make this country soar. Then we could go into the Democratic convention next month and figure it out. I had Ted Dintersmith on radio. He and a Georgetown law professor, he's a venture capitalist. She, Rosa Brooks, they wrote a piece together. They embraced the same sort of thing. They're the ones who coined the words blitz primary. James Clyburn. I mean, even Clyburn, and I say even Clyburn because he's been such a loyal supporter of President Biden and, of course, played such a critical role in that South Carolina primary and has harnessed so much African-American support for President Biden. But I say even James Clyburn because one wonders if he'd be part of the group that would say, hey, it's got to be the vice president. Even he said you can fashion a process that's already in place and make it a mini primary. So there are several reasons why President Biden might not be inclined to do what I'm advocating and others are advocating, which is a competitive process. I mean, he might appreciate her on the merits. He might believe that the vice president has earned it and that she's best suited for the job. There's also a financial argument, which is to say that the $100 or so million that sit in the Biden-Harris kitty would be hers and not necessarily somebody else's. And the third consideration as to why President Biden might say, I'm going to get out and cast my lot with the vice president is that perhaps he's still smarting from the way in which he went through a similar process with President Obama. I mean, remember in 2016, Beau had just passed. The vice president was contemplating a run for the presidency. According to all the reports at the time, the president decided he was going to opt out and discouraged his vice president from getting into the race. This is Peter Baker's reporting at the time. Mr. Obama did not want to push and sought to give his vice president room to come to the decision himself. Over the course of weekly lunches, he gently pressed Mr. Biden on his thinking. Eventually, the president arranged for his own strategist to deliver a daunting assessment of the odds against a race. Mr. Biden got the message. The president was not encouraging. And then fast forward to 2020, President Obama didn't endorse his former vice president until Biden had secured the nomination. Not until, he was the last man standing and Bernie Sanders had dropped out. So I don't know, human factors. Maybe Biden looks at the way he was treated by Obama in that regard and figures he's not going to treat Kamala Harris in similar fashion. Okay, so it's the final night of the Republican National Convention. And it's funny how often I've said on radio that the intangibles, the football bouncing, the people whose names we don't know, the events that we could never forecast are going to influence this. Who would have believed 60 days ago? Who would have believed 60 days ago? We were probably still in the midst of that 5-week criminal trial for which Donald Trump became a convicted felon. Who would have believed that now we'd be here in July on the 18th, on the final night, that he would have been convicted, but then he would have scored a victory in the immunity case. Consequently, the sentencing for the felony conviction would be postponed. Who would have predicted that the debate would take place? Who would have predicted that Judge Aileen Cannon would have thrown out the Mar-a-Lago case, which I always thought was most straightforward and clean based on the facts, not necessarily on the law? Nobody would have predicted that he'd been shot at and survived, that he'd be winning in all of these polls, that Elon Musk would have said 45 mil a month is what he was prepared to go, and on and on and on, that Nikki Haley would have been there on the debates, on the convention stage, that Ron DeSantis would have done likewise. And oh, by the way, as discussed with Eric, the so-called intern on today's program, that Truth Social, which never found a footing, which can't be justified based on its cash flow, has put a paper profit into former President Trump's hands of $4 to $4.5 billion. So, those civil judgments that he faces and the criminal penalties that he faces, which could have wiped him out financially, because who knows what he was really worth, he really steps in it, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, it's honest to God. I said tongue in cheek today, I'm almost of the opinion that it's all divine intervention for how much this has all turned. Tonight, Kid Rock, Hulk Hogan, Dana White. You may think that's crazy, that they are apparently going to be the speakers leading up to former President Trump. I happen to think it's genius. He's a populist. Kid Rock, Hulk Hogan, Dana White puts him in direct touch with working class, younger, white males whose fathers voted for Democrats. It's a total enthuse the base kind of a night. This convention so far, I think, has been pitch perfect. Oh, there you go, carrying his, nope, just analyzing. They hid the crazies. They've choreographed in prime time in the 10 o'clock hour each night the most compelling speakers, those Gold Star families last night, and the mom, pardon me, I don't remember her name, African-American woman whose son comes home from Iraq only to be killed by a migrant with a knife in New York, whom Alvin Bragg then refuses to prosecute. This stuff is striking a chord. So the momentum is really on the side of Republicans. I'm most interested, like a lot of other people, to see his tone tonight. Can he rein it in? You know, can he keep his demons at bay? When he speaks, I see those wheels turning in his head. If it gets boring and he's looking at the prompters, that's when he goes off script. That's when he enthuses his base and gets himself in trouble. So can he keep it under wraps and be measured? He's got the base. They're not leaving him. Wild horses couldn't keep them away. Fight, fight, fight. The question is, can he cause suburbanites, particularly women, to take a second look, especially in a split screen with a very frail president of the United States, and say, I'm going to hold my nose and I'm going to vote for him? That's where I think it stands. Doug Sosnick was excellent on the program on Monday based on his data that preceded the assassination attempt. 7 swing states, 4 of them Sun Belt, right? North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, probably out of reach for Biden, if it is Biden. Consequently, President Biden needs to win Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, because Trump would already be at 268 electoral votes, just too shy. That's why. And, you know, every time I discuss this, then it becomes one of shoot the messenger, as if I'm applauding all of this. I'm just analyzing it for you. That's what I wanted to say. That, and thank you. It is so nice to mingle. PJ, are you still there? And am I still being heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Can you tell me whether Mark Halpern is in tonight's audience?
Sure thing. Let me see. So there are 7 Marks. There's a Mark's iPad. There's a Mark R. There's a Mark. I'm not exactly sure which. If he were to raise his hand, that actually puts him at the top of the list. So Mark,
Okay.
if you go for the react button on Zoom, it's a little heart at the bottom of the bar. That'll put you right at the top of the list. So I only have a couple people raising their hand right now. There's 4, but no Mark.
Okay. All right. I'm going to turn it over to the audience via you. How would you like to
Great.
do this?
So there's 4 people that are currently raising their hand. If you guys didn't notice from before, in the bottom of your Zoom bar, if you're on mobile or on your desktop, there's a little heart, and that heart allows you to raise your hand and go to the top of the list. At that point, we'll unmute you. You can ask your question to Michael, and then we'll be good. So I'm going to start right at the top. Oh man, a bunch of people just raised their hand. All right, here we go. Stand by.
And by the way, let's move. I'm saying this out loud for my own benefit as well, because I'm the one who's long-winded. Let's try and move quickly.
All right, here we go. John Maxa is up.
Good evening, Michael.
Hi, John.
How
I
are
love
you?
it. I see your Heineken Zero. They're as good as I say they are, right?
They're incredible, and it's the reason I wanted to raise my hand tonight, because you mentioned it after your dry January, and I never would imagine that I would have tried a dry January or a dry anything, and I haven't had a drink in probably 3 or 4 months now, so I give you a lot of credit for that. The Heineken Zeros and the Athletics are both great, so thank you. I feel
That's awesome. Enjoy. PJ, I think he
All right,
muted.
great. Chuck Hall is up next.
Hey, Michael, great to see you. Drinking
Chuck.
my Cabernet here.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Good to be seen. So I think one of the things that people are missing with Biden is the psychology of somebody of his age needing to step aside. Years ago, I took over a department for a man who really didn't want to retire, but was kind of being forced out. He anointed me as his successor, and he told me on his last day, it's like when the mob hit is coming, it's always best if you get to choose the person who does you. And so I think about that with Biden, and I think his off-ramp is having a say in his successor. As much as I'd like the Blitz primary, I think Biden is going to exercise that power at the very end.
I don't have a strong feeling. If you asked me which way do I think he goes, I think he probably endorses, but I'm not positive. The only thing I'm sure of is that at this point now there's too much data and too many voices that he respects who have said you can't do it.
All right, Jeff Bush. Jeff Bush is up.
Hi, Michael. How are you tonight?
Hi, Jeff.
Good. Well, I'm glad somebody you asked earlier if Mark Halpern was on. I was on his earlier call. Do you mind if I share that information?
Not at all, please.
Okay. Mark is reporting that his sources are telling him that Biden will drop out Saturday or Sunday. He will speak highly of Kamala Harris, but not endorse her. And it will be a competitive primary.
Well, I would love to see that happen. And now the question would become, who will get in? All these folks that we talk about, the front bench, will Josh Shapiro get in? Will Gretchen Whitmer get in? Will Gavin Newsom get in? I don't know, because I think there's this added, let's talk about this. I think there's this added dynamic. If you're going to get in and take her on, you'll be perceived in some quarters as standing in the way potentially of denying the first female of color from being president of the United States. The Congressional Black Caucus, and notice what President Biden did after the debate, those 2 radio interviews that backfired with African-American hosts, immediately then went to the Congressional Black Caucus, was able to win their support, spoke to the NAACP this week. That didn't go so well, but there's a lot of goodwill there toward him. But I think that there's a lot of sentiment that says it ought to be her. And if it's not, and you're a Democrat, do you want to be that person? Do you want to be the individual running against that opportunity to break a ceiling?
All right, up next is Howard. You're unmuted.
Oh, hey, Michael.
Hi.
We're gonna get to a Flyers game this year. I promise you, because I got the old Flyers sticker. But seriously, Michael, the one person that they don't talk about who really would have an influence is Ashley Biden, Joe's daughter. I never hear her come up, and I think that's the one who could really plant the seed. You talked about talking to your dad about driving. I had that conversation with my elderly parents. I'm just curious what you think. I think she holds the keys literally to say, Dad, enough is enough. What do you think?
I had Val Biden in studio. I'll tell you a quick funny story. But the bottom line is that I think that his sister Val carries a lot of weight in this. She has been his longtime advisor. She was his first campaign manager ever, and I think managed all of the Senate reelection battles in Delaware. The funny story is that in studio, as TC can attest, we've got some memorabilia, some ephemera, and some pictures on the wall. There's a photograph of me with Papa Bush. There's a photograph of me interviewing President Obama in the Oval Office. Yeah, there's a photograph of me with Donald Trump in the Oval Office. And for space reasons, it sits, not because we selected it to be preeminent, but for space reasons, it sits under TC's console, directly facing any guest who is in studio. We don't often have in-studio guests. So the president's sister came in, this was like a year ago, and she sits down. We got along very well. And finally, she sort of, settles in and looks around, and she sees this picture of me with Donald Trump in the Oval Office. And like you can see her face go flush. And I said, wait a minute, wait a minute. I said, your brother's right over there. And I pointed to a photograph of yours truly interviewing Joe Biden when he was vice president. And she's like, well, why is Joe all the way over there and you've got Trump right here? It just became a very funny thing. She impressed me. She impressed me a great deal. She had written a memoir and she impressed me with her street smarts and her wit. I think she's a voice that would talk sense to him. I don't know what the relationship is with Ashley because you just don't hear much about them. But don't you think it's Jill? I mean, don't you think that she's the one who holds all the cards? I would.
All right, Sarah is up next.
By the way, I love his man cave, his Flyers bumper sticker, and all that's going on. The guitar, rethink Stanley Cup. That the bumper sticker that I had on my car back in the day. Wait, who am I kidding? It was the family car. I wasn't old enough to drive. Was the one that said, "Only the Lord saves more than Perron." Come on, was that the greatest? Okay, PJ, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sarah's up.
Hi, Michael. I'm
Hi, Sarah.
From Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I can't remember the guy that you had on the other day said the brats were great.
That was Mark.
Sheboygan, where I live, is where they come from. Mark, yeah, Sheboygan is where they're made. So my question, I was thinking about this today, and I'm wondering real quick, do you think because of the way how Trump debates and the craziness that's been going on, do you think by any chance Biden and everybody is like holding off a little bit and waiting until like less time to give them for ambush back? You know what I mean? Like they're saying, well, let's wait a little while so it doesn't give him ammo to go after this person.
No.
Like, let's see how long we can hold out.
I don't think that. I don't think that at all because it's a matter of weeks, and I don't think Trump armed with a couple of weeks could do more or less damage to whomever it is. First of all, whomever it is, if it's you in Sheboygan, you start out with 45% of the vote. Anybody starts out with 45% of the vote because it's a vote against Donald Trump. So it's a game of inches. I am gonna claim, and I told you so, and it's this. The night of the debate, I tweeted just selectively, and one of the tweets that I sent said, Donald Trump needs to be careful what he wishes for, because I thought that the debate was going so well for Trump. Actually, it wasn't really going well for Trump. It was just going poor for Biden. And immediately I said to myself, this could cause Biden to be replaced by a stronger candidate. I believe that like right now, the Trump people are nervous about what might follow because whomever it is, if it's the vice president, I think she is a slightly better candidate than the president starting out. And if it's any of the others, I think that they're in a much better position. There was a poll that came out yesterday. I think we're linking to it in the newsletter tomorrow, which showed that Scott Kelly, the former astronaut, a name that you never hear, Wes Moore, Josh Shapiro, and Gretchen Whitmer all outperform Biden and all outperform Harris. They are the strongest among those who were surveyed. You can read it in The Hill if you want to fact check me and see where I'm getting it from.
Up next is Garrett.
Hey, Michael, how are you? You read my social media post on your June 15th show. And I don't know if you remember, but it was about, the MAGA movement outlasts Trump. And you read my post, if you remember, where it was, per the poll, I believe we're at an inflection point where both parties are going to evolve after this election. The outcome of the election, the aftermath will dictate what type of evolutionary track will take place in America. A new era awaits us. And I really was impressed with your reaction, only because it made you think a little bit, and this was pre-debate with Biden and Trump. This is obviously pre-assassination attempt. And now, given the assassination attempt on former President Trump, and obviously how Biden performed, and now we see, calls for him to step aside. It's just amazing the last 6 weeks, and that we're seeing in real time all of these latest developments every several hours or so. And I always think about Gavin Newsom being a part of the ticket. I know that on the Democratic side, maybe he has his sights set for the White House in 2028. You can look at the Republican side. I think Ron DeSantis is probably going to look to, jockey position with Nikki Haley in 2028. But going back to Newsom, because he had so many primetime interviews with all the major networks going back to last year, and because they put him against Ron DeSantis in the Sean Hannity moderated debate, I feel that, hypothetically speaking, if it was going to be, let's say, Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, in some ways, I feel like that would be a very compelling ticket, although you have both Democrats from California. But it would have been interesting if Trump picked Rubio, because then you would have had both candidates from Florida. And because we've been hearing in the media, and even like Gavin Newsom taking out, commercial airtime in Florida to promote California, it would have been interesting if it was like a Florida-California 2024 election.
I agree. I watched that debate that Sean Hannity hosted with Newsom and DeSantis, and I appreciated it. And I thought they were both pretty good on their feet. Look, I'll just cut it short and say Gavin Newsom a week ago Saturday was in my hometown, Doylestown, Pennsylvania, county seat, Bucks County, Philly burbs. And I'm sorry, I'm too cynical than to accept that he was there 3,000 miles away to carry the flag for Joe Biden. I think he went to Michigan after he was in Bucks County. I'm not sure of that. I am sure that he was in, the Philly burbs. He clearly wants it. Is he going to get into it with Kamala Harris? I don't know. There is that restriction. It's the reason Dick Cheney moved to Wyoming before he became W's running mate. But I think you can massage that. And for all I know, she could be registered to vote right now in Washington, D.C. I don't know. I don't see that as being a ticket. I think a better question. I think they're frenemies too. We had a great reporter on, whose name escapes me now, who's the political reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle, and I was interested to know what's the dynamic between them. Is he willing to get in with her for some kind of an expedited primary? We are about to find out, I think.
All right, next is Daryl.
Hello.
How are you?
How are you? Very good, Michael. First of all, I'm a big fan of yours. Thank you for always being down the middle on everything. I have 2 points, 2 quick points, and one question. The 2 quick points are this: I don't think Trump toning it down matters at this stage of the game. I think the Republicans are just, everything's coming up well for them. They're looking too good, and the Dems are looking real bad right now. So I don't think his tone really matters at this point. 2, I think that Kamala Harris being, having a African American and Indian, I think that's being overstated. Whereas President Obama was a senator, he was the first to actually run and win. So maybe I can see the significance there. I feel like there's maybe too much emphasis on her race and whether or not she's, chosen, crowned by Biden or not. I think she should have to run as well. Here's my question, and this is something that's bothered me for quite some time. After the assassination, President Biden was criticized for rhetoric, and there was a lot of emphasis on turning the rhetoric down. Where was all this emphasis? I mean, I think everybody can agree here that some of the rhetoric from President Trump, or former President Trump, and the Republicans before this assassination was far, far more aggressive and over the top than what Biden said. So why now is there so much emphasis on toning down the rhetoric?
You mean why emphasis directed toward President Biden when it seems that that's a lopsided calculation?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I guess I would say, like, I get it. And if you were to ask me, where's the balance between the rhetoric, it would be far outweighed the Republican rhetoric versus the Democratic rhetoric. I hope I'm keeping this straight. I think I am. But watch a little bit of Fox News, because the narrative there is one of the weaponization of the judicial system against Donald Trump, and this being, I mean, their pitch, their version of this is to say that the whole system's been brought to bear against Trump unfairly. He's been portrayed as this evildoer, and consequently, we shouldn't be surprised that someone would want to take him out. You may have heard me say earlier in the week that when I saw this headline, and I picked ABC, but I could have picked a whole bunch of them. But here we were in the first 24 hours after the assassination attempt, and the headline said, gunman a Republican. I may still do a commentary on this on CNN. I'm not so sure. And today I'm paying close attention. And what do we find? We find that it looks like he had done searches relative to Biden, the DNC, Trump's movements, the FBI director, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and a lot of mental illness inquiries as well. It is what I thought of, which is that this guy, unfortunately, was sick, not defending anything that transpired. But we were so quick to jump, like, is he an R or is he a D? Where's the political manifesto? And apparently there isn't one. The whole climate is too hot. There's no doubt about that. Just much, much too hot. And I hope that everybody drops it down. But I don't know. We'll get a good tell tonight from Trump at 10 o'clock.
All right. Up next is Liz. Ready to go.
Hi, Michael. I'm a longtime listener, first-time caller.
All right.
And I, when the Trump v. United States decision came down and the media went insane, I am kind of a big fish in a small pond. So I put out an instructional video on the actual opinion. And now, especially after the assassination attempt, I feel like Justice Sotomayor should give an apology to the nation for getting them worked up over things that they shouldn't be worked up over. What is your opinion on that?
In other words, you're sort of responding to me having that conversation a moment ago with Daryl, where he was asking about the rhetoric, and I said the narrative on the right is one of you Democrats, you Sotomayor, you've made Trump a target because of the way that you've portrayed him.
Well, it wasn't really a reaction to that, to be honest. Like, I've had my phone on and I've been taking care of my 2 little kids. So I didn't really listen to what you guys were listening to, like what you were talking about. But honestly, when Justice Sotomayor put out her dissent, I read her dissent first. I reacted like physically to it, emotionally to it. But then when I read the actual opinion, I was like, oh, wait, like they're not giving him sovereign immunity to all the things. It was literally probably 2% of the things that he was up against at the time. And they remanded everything else to the lower courts. So I really do honestly feel like maybe, hi, come here. Maybe Justice Sotomayor, sorry, they're with me all the time. Maybe Justice Sotomayor should give an apology to the nation for, saying that
I'm only going to
happen. I don't think they
Liz,
will.
I'm going to agree with you simply by saying this. I too read it. I think that the most recent opinions, because they know how many Americans are curious and going to want to read them and don't have legal backgrounds, I think they've been written on an appropriate level so that people can follow. They were not insane. It was not an insane opinion. There was a logic to it, even if you don't agree with the majority view. So to the extent it was then cast as the court taking a dive for Trump, they have lifetime appointments. There's no, I don't think that there's any feeling that they need to take a hit for Donald Trump. Maybe Clarence Thomas, I don't know, but not the rest of them. So thanks for that. And thanks for taking the time to read it. I try when there's a major case like this to put the opinion. I'll give you an example. Tomorrow's newsletter, rather than have a story about the Republican National Committee or convention platform, I've got a link in tomorrow's newsletter. They're like these 21 bullet points. It's the most simplified platform that I've ever seen. I want you to read it. And I do the same with those Supreme Court opinions. I give you the link so that you can read it on your own time.
All right, up next is Robert.
Thanks, PJ. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Robert.
Just 2 quick things. Regarding Joe Biden first. Joe Biden I think he should do a couple of things. He needs to step down, but before he steps down, I think he needs to pardon his son, Hunter, and secondly, pardon Donald Trump. It's like, I know that's going to be not something very popular to say because I'm on both sides with that. If he does that, it makes the country able to move forward, I think, though. So we can actually say, okay, we have our Republican candidate. We have our Democratic candidate. Well, that's up in the air, too. That moves on to my second point here. It's like, what would it take in this country to get proportional voting? Because the two-party system is broke. It's not working. It doesn't represent the country as a whole. And I don't think many people really like the candidates we have. And that's what the two-party system's gotten us.
So I'm going to totally ignore your second point and say that I'm making a note as to your first, because I love the poll question. On the way out the door, should President Biden pardon Hunter, Trump, both, neither? That's a great great discussion item, and I'll use that in some fashion for sure. I don't know how it gets done, but I do want Hunter pardoned because I feel, as I've been saying, initially he was going to get a free ride. The plea agreement that a year ago, June, was going to get struck in Delaware is not something that would have been offered to any of us. And now it's the complete reverse, where he's going to go to the woodshed more than I think any other American would have, the gun charge in particular. So, and I think as a practical matter, those two federal Trump prosecutions, obviously, if he wins, are going nowhere. If they're just going to go on for forever and ever and ever. So, got to think about it, but wiping him out and leveling the playing surface. Some people are probably pissed, even though that you and I are having this conversation, because they're saying, wait a minute, Hunter's behavior pales in comparison to that of Trump relative to January 6th. So I want to think about it, but it's a great issue and it's a terrific poll question.
Up next is Bob.
Hey, Michael.
Hi, Bob.
Hi. Hey, how's it going, fellow Doylestonean?
All right.
Hey, so we'll keep it short. I was a big believer back in February that Biden should step out of the race when they passed on the Super Bowl interview, as James Carville said, and I think you agree, the clear tell that they were they knew they were onto something. But so now let's just make it a horse race. I'll put mine out there. It's Whitmer Shapiro is my ideal ticket. And what's yours?
Josh Shapiro is going to be on the dream ticket. If you're asking me, give me the most formidable Democratic ticket. Shapiro is going to be there. He's probably going to be there in a vice presidential capacity.
I think so.
Not in a presidential capacity. I don't know that Whitmer is most deserving of that top billing if it's Shapiro who is the VP. When I say what I'm about to say, the listeners in California, they get all worked up and they say, like, you don't know his record. He's horrible, yada, yada, yada. What if it were Newsom and Shapiro?
Yeah, I think Newsom's too slick and too roundly hated by the right, even the moderate right.
Mm-hmm.
That's my feeling, anyway.
Right. To be continued.
Yeah.
Thank you that's another great poll question. Is if I'm right that we're about to experience a change, then we can survey the audience as what is the strongest option that Democrats have.
Up next is Doug.
Oh, hello, Michael. Good evening. I think the Democrats will quickly coalesce around Harris because I don't think the DEI elements in the party would let them do otherwise. And I think actually she could be a quite formidable candidate paired with the right person. And I think Josh Shapiro, who we were just talking about, might be the right person. As you think you said earlier, Black and Jew would be quite a ticket. I think that anybody who would have voted for Joe Biden will vote for Kamala Harris. And I think maybe some independents would. Plus, I think she'd attract a lot of people, just like Obama did, who probably may not have voted because they weren't excited about the two choices, the two octogenarians, might say, hell, go to the polls and vote for Kamala Harris.
So it's entirely possible that she's being vastly underestimated. I mean, the only look that we really got of her in that capacity was on that debate stage that particular night. Good for her, because that bar is pretty low, and the debate would be very important. A debate between she and Trump would be very, very important. And if she had a good effort, I think it's entirely possible that she, she could beat him. She starts out, I agree with you, with the same percentage of the vote. Identify for me a Biden supporter who wouldn't still be there for Harris. I don't think they exist. So the vice presidential selection becomes very, very important. And yeah, anything's possible. I'm not going to discount what you just said.
Up next is Jeremy.
Good evening, Michael. Thank you for having us. I was just thinking about the recent elections in other countries. So the UK the Conservatives just suffered their worst defeat in almost 200 years. Marine Le Pen had a huge rebuke in France. Mexico just elected their first female president, leftist, in 200 years. So I was just curious, what do you think? Are our polls actually accurate? Is Trump really that popular? Or are we just an outlier as far as polling goes in Western democracies?
So, I mean, I understand Macron rolled the dice, and by a narrow margin, it paid off for him. There were those EU elections that by now were 30 days ago, where I might embarrass myself here, but in Germany with Scholz, I guess, and in France, and the third of them was Meloni in Italy. Conservatives made a very good showing in each of those. The anomaly, I think, is what happened in the UK, where conservatives have been in control for so darn long. Maybe it was a unique animal. I don't know. Don't forget that Brexit preceded the rise of Trump, which is why I think that there's something global going on here relative to immigration, birth rates, the impact of climate change.
Especially Germany.
Several individuals ago, there was a guy, and I apologize, I don't remember his name, but he said that he got a social media through on the CNN program and wanted to know if I thought MAGA would outlast Donald Trump. And I hope that I said to him then that I believe that it will, because although you don't have a Trump-like figure among us that we're aware of so far, there's something in the ether out there. It's not just us. I think it's the factors that I described, and it's going to go on for a while. Bottom line, how predictive was the UK for what is going to happen here? I think we're relatively unique because of Trump. I think he is such a unique animal that I'm not looking at any one of those countries and saying, there it is, he wins or he loses.
ML, you're up next.
Thank you. Hello, Michael. I'll do it Halperin two-way style. I'm a center-right independent, leaning toward Trump, anti-Biden. There's a push-pull here to my observations. I just wanted to kind of run across. Kamala Harris, if the nominee, should fear history. Trump beat the only woman candidate ever, so it could be too likely that he would go 2-0, especially with a weak, unqualified woman as a nominee. Potentially, that could be a perspective. I think it might mean a lot more if Biden steps down as acting president, but doubt that happens. Otherwise, Kamala Harris doesn't have a strong starting position because they could break history. That would add to the whole magic of the thing to really amp it up, because they really need to. And if she had a chance, it would be from as president. And then the other thing is Harris is a wonderful California politician, but a terrible general election candidate, in my opinion. Doubly so if Newsom does anything. I think a two-women ticket is suicide, not sound. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Which piece of that can I respond to? Tell me one thing that you want me to say something about. Say it. Number two. You're giving me way too much credit, dude. You just gave me like 9 things. What was number 2?
Yeah, the fact about Biden stepping down and Kamala being the sitting acting president and then starting from that position to go forward.
No way. I mean, I see no scenario. It's going to be such a what am I trying to say? An act that he doesn't want to do, to say that he's not running. It's such a loss of his dignity. At this stage, I believe it will be such a loss of his dignity to say, I'm not going to run, when he's been saying, I'm in it, I'm in it, I'm in it, I'm in it. That to now ask him not to finish this term is a bridge too far. I do not believe he'd be willing to do that, and to give her the advantage. I see zero. You can call me this week or next week and tell me I was wrong on this, but I don't see any. He's no way do I see him stepping down before the end of the term, unless something bad, and I don't wish for that, but something really terrible should happen.
Stephen, you're next.
Right. Oh, thank you so much. What a treat. So much to say. So, ML, the previous speaker, I would disagree with him whether Kamala Harris is qualified. She's definitely qualified. However, I do agree with him. I am a Californian. I do agree with him that she would be kind of a vulnerable general election candidate. The difference between, as a Californian, and the difference between Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom is that Gavin Newsom often tries to go out of his way to be humble and show humility, and point out that some things he's not so confident in. And I see that Harris is kind of the opposite. She kind of oozes overconfidence, and sometimes that comes across as off-putting to people. In terms of who should be on the ticket, the Democrats have to have a woman with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. That's kind of goes without saying. And there has to be someone from the Rust Belt. The Democrats have to put up that blue wall in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The final point I'll leave you with, Michael, in terms of your prospective four-choice poll, is, to me, it seems unclear what we would pardon Trump for. I mean, would it be kind of a generic pardon for crimes against democracy? I mean, there are so many different court cases. You know, there's the documents case. There's the asking for 11,200 whatever votes in Georgia. There's, you know, the civil case, which I'm not sure.
That I can answer. I can tell you for what he would be pardoned. By the way, what's behind you? I'm trying to figure out.
Those are jellyfish. It's images of jellyfish from the Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Very cool.
One of my favorite places.
The answer to your question is, I mean, he would be pardoned for two buckets of allegations. I say allegations, not indictments, because the Mar-a-Lago case now is kind of in limbo. It's been dismissed. There could be an appeal taken by Jack Smith. He says that he will. And the Tanya Chutkan case, the January 6th case, those are the two federal cases. Okay. There's no pardon that Joe Biden could offer for the Alvin Bragg case. I think there's a legitimate shot at an appeal on a variety of bases in the New York case, but no federal action could make that go away, nor could it make the Georgia case go away. I'm not convinced that Georgia case is ever getting to trial anyway.
Right.
So what would it look like? It would look like a pardon for Trump on those two indictments. Couldn't do anything about New York. Could lean on Kathy Hochul to give him a pardon there, and obviously Hunter gets pardoned as well.
Yeah, it seems that Trump kind of protects himself or immunizes himself against culpability by claiming that people were always out to get him. Which, even if true, I mean, even if everyone was always out to get a murderer, once they commit murder, it doesn't mean they're absolved of their crimes, right? So, anyways, thank you.
Right, but I mean, when the history of this election gets written, I think there has to be a big theme as to how he benefited from the perception, perhaps justified in some areas, that the forces of law had been brought to bear. I'm not comfortable with that New York conviction. You've heard me perhaps say it a million times. Do I think he slept with her and paid her off? Absolutely. But the whole way in which they got around the statute of limitations by elevating it to felony status with those charges that would never have been brought against somebody else, I'll lay it off on Fareed Zakaria. Like Fareed said, if his name weren't Donald Trump, he wouldn't have been prosecuted in that case. And I think that's true, and that's never sat well with me. In the same way that I believe that OJ killed his wife and Ron Goldman, and yet when they got him in Vegas and they threw away the key for stealing back his memorabilia, it never sat well with me. Because to me, it was just like retribution, because we all know he killed his wife and Ron Goldman. That's not the way the law ought to be applied.
Up next, a robot wizard from the future.
Hey, sorry about the dog. Can't help that timing. But anyway, I like Shapiro. I really like Mayor Pete. But I just wonder, Michael, if you or anybody in the group here, if we're all just taking a step back and looking at the history that we're living through right now. I mean, I'm only 44. I've only read about the 60s and watched documentaries. I wasn't alive for any of that. But when you look at starting out with the two oldest candidates ever, and then that debate, and then the assassination attempt, and now we might have a candidate drop out. I mean, our kids are going to be, our grandkids, everybody's going to be reading about this era in time for a long time. It's moving so fast, and it's so consuming for me to try and stay on top of all of the developments that I haven't had time to sit back, like you recommend. It's great advice, and just sort of appreciate the spectacle of what this is all about. I mean, for all the times on radio that I've said, we can't predict what's going to happen, I never imagined it would get this crazy. And by the way, it's mid-July. You know, there's time on the clock, no matter what happens in the next week with President Biden or tonight with former President Trump. There's a lot of time on the clock for other strange things to play out, and I'm sure they will. But you're right. It's why I said I gotta publish this cartoon book, because I want there to be some means of recreating the year that was. Yes, it's beyond any of our wildest imaginations. I remember when I wrote my novel Talk, and I pitched it, and it's about a talk radio host who becomes a kingmaker. Okay, now how crazy is it? Tucker Carlson is speaking at the Republican National Convention. I mean, it's like I was 10 years ahead of and people in Hollywood said it's a bit fantastical, isn't it? Look at today. If you wrote a screenplay on this 5 years ago, they'd have thought you were nuts.
Up next is Max.
Hey, Michael. I'm a 23-year-old. I just graduated college, and I just want to get your opinion on how much a ticket that doesn't have some old timer on it would motivate my voting base, because I went to a public school in Kansas, not like one of these Ivy League schools that gets talked about in the media all the time as being this hotbed for left-wing policies and whatnot. Most of the people in my orbit, they just don't want to see two old guys running for president. And I want to get your thoughts on how much having a Kamala Harris, Josh Shapiro ticket with two people that aren't 80 years old would potentially motivate the 18 to 25-year-old base that I'm a part of right now.
You would know better than I. I mean, I would like to think that people who feel disconnected because of the age issue would come into the fold, but I don't know. I wish I were closer to it, but I'm not. I'm 62. I remember being the outlier when I was 18, 19, and 20, because wild horses couldn't have kept me away from not only voting but working the polls. But I was the oddball. So the sort of the youth being less interested. There's nothing new about that. I have to imagine that it's even worse than it was in my era, because how, if you're your age, do you look at Nancy Pelosi or Dianne Feinstein, rest her soul, or Trump, or of course Biden, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're Mitch McConnell. I mean, you don't see yourself in these individuals.
Yeah, and another thing that I'm thinking about too right now is, I have certain people that I know that are all in on the Trump thing, let's own the libs and all this other stuff. But I'm curious to know, or to see, if the more the RNC platform gets talked about, and the Agenda 47 and stuff gets pushed, and all these social issues that don't really resonate as much with my age group, I feel how much are those going to affect, or how much will that affect who from my age group votes for Donald Trump? Because a lot of people right now are fired up about Joe Biden being old and that debate performance, and him almost dying, getting assassinated. But when they see we want to do this about gay marriage, this about abortion rights, this about marijuana and all this other stuff that doesn't really resonate as much of my age group, I'm interested to see how that affects it, and if that gets talked about tonight at the RNC, because I really haven't heard that much about their platform so far.
No, it won't get talked about. And tomorrow in the newsletter, click on the link that allows you to read the RNC. It's very vague, very cleverly. You'll probably end up agreeing with 90% of it because of the way in which they structured it. They're too clever to be pinned down. I remember in the 80s, like the platform was a big thing, and the vote on approving the platform was a big thing. No, it's all about Trump. And I think that the people around him are very sophisticated and not putting things in it. And he, of course, disavows Project 2025. So he's very hard to hold accountable for any of the written issue-oriented things.
Up next is Sharon.
Is it me?
Yep.
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Michael. You just said what my issue is. Project 2025. How many people do not know the 4 pillars of the Project 2025? My daughter's pretty much apolitical. I'm from Oregon. She went by my brother's in Texas. One's a millionaire. And so I don't push politics on her. But if you read the pillars of 2025, which Vance, Alyssa Farah Griffin, I'm sure you know who she is, right, Michael?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
She said she saw the first draft of Project 2025 before she left office. She left office on January 6, 2021. She saw the rough draft. Mark Meadows is involved in it, and a whole lot of people who was in Trump's administration. I am surprised at how many people do not know what is coming with Project 2025. And you were the first one to bring it up. I've been on hold for like quite a while. So,
okay, all I can say is I've read it. It's dense. It's 900 pages. I'm not going to tell you I got through 900 pages, but I'm very familiar with what it represents and how they pulled it together. Trump says, I disagree with certain aspects of it. He doesn't want to be held accountable for it. There are 140, don't hold me to this, but I'm pretty sure of what I'm telling you, this number, 140 individuals who were either authors or editors of what's in it, who served in his administration or have a direct connection to his campaign. Go ahead, real quick.
They're going to get rid of over 50,000 government jobs and make them president appointed.
Yeah, I know something about that too, because I was one of those presidential appointees on Bush's watch. So I get what that's all about. But here, let me give you my takeaway on this, because I'm limited on time and I need to go watch some of what's unfolding. And I know you want to do that as well. The point of Project 2025, even if it's not the platform of Trump and the Republicans necessarily, the people who wrote it will be the people who will populate his administration. It's a tell. I mean, that's the deal. The intelligentsia of Washington and the think tanks and those connected to the government, it's actually not a big community. And they're telling you where they're coming from. So it is something that everybody needs to be knowledgeable about. PJ, one more, and then I say thank you and appreciate everybody, and we all go watch what unfolds.
Sure thing. Up next is France.
France?
Hey, Michael, it's Sean in France. We're both big listeners of yours.
Every day.
Hey guys, how are you?
Great. Just 2 things. I think voting starts September 15th in Pennsylvania. I know here in California, it's October 7th. So there's not as much time as people think.
Correct.
And then secondly, I know you commented upon this earlier, but if Biden were to fully resign, he creates the first woman president. It may be an exit ramp for him.
I may be wrong. It's just not what I'm reading when I look at him. When I look at him, I look at a guy whose back is really up and he's angry. He looked like an angry dude when he spoke at the NAACP a day or 2 ago. It's like one thing to ask him not to run again, but then to have to say I'm stopping now would be him saying I'm not capable at this moment in time. and he believes he's not only capable, but that he can serve another term. I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening.
But with that said, Senator, people are speaking to him every day. His constituents saying, "Step down." It's just, the number's getting greater and greater.
Right, but I think they're probably saying to him, "Look, you're going to be 86 at the end of your term, God willing." They're putting it in the future sense. I doubt that Schumer or Jeffries or Adam Schiff, any of them, have said to him, "You got to go now."
Well, and then just another area for you to look at is when all the mail ballots go out. You know, when do the ballots have to be printed?
Right. Yeah,
So
this has got to get resolved. This has
Yeah.
got to get resolved soon. Is the bottom line. We've never seen anything like it, and it's going to happen quickly.
All right, thank you.
Hey, thank all of you. Thank PJ. PJ, thank you, man. You'll have to tell me later if this went as well as I think that it did. Seems very smooth, and it seems like we've got a huge crowd tonight. I love the fact that we can get together and mingle like this. My plan is I'm going to have a drink. I'm going to fire this up right now, watch the rest of the night, and talk about it in the morning, and hope that you